Good morning. It's a great pleasure to have Inge Huijbrechts, who's the Global Senior Vice President for Responsible Business and Safety and Security with the Radisson Hotel Group, with us this morning. I'll introduce you a little more in a minute, but before I do that, can I remind you there is a Q&A in about half an hour's time, and we're very keen to see your questions coming through. So please put them online for us to have a look at, and we will go to those questions in about 30 minutes' time. Inge Huijbrechts is at the forefront, leading on the responsibility agenda in the hotel sector. We are looking forward to hearing today from Inge about what's happening post-COVID-19 and how she sees the responsible tourism agenda and the responsible hospitality agenda developing in the wake of that. Inge, could I begin by asking you to tell us something about your role at Radisson?
Yes, thank you, Harold, and good morning, everybody dialing in, and a pleasure to be here at the virtual ATM. So my role is I'm the head of safety and security and responsible business at Radisson Hotel Group globally, which means for 1,200 hotels and 7 brands in over 100 countries. And responsible business is our work on Think People, Think Community, and Think Planet.
It seems to me that very rarely have these two roles been combined. It's unusual in my experience to see safety and security combined with a broader responsible business agenda. When did Radisson do that?
Actually, they asked me to. I was already the head of global responsible business, and 2 years ago, when the previous head of safety and security retired, they actually asked me to head up both departments. And I must say that I had a long think about it because I had to understand how they would come together and match. But I think both from a long-term risk mitigation, from a license to operate and integration into the community, and from an employee engagement, they absolutely make sense to be headed by one person. But it is rare, I agree.
Did Radisson have foreknowledge of this COVID impact, or did it come as a surprise? That wasn't why you reorganized.
No, we didn't at all. In a way, I wish I had, but I also wish I hadn't, because you don't want to know what's coming when it's of this impact.
It has been a nightmare, hasn't it? Do you want to just tell us something about how COVID-19 has impacted on your work, Inge?
Well, it has a lot, actually, and I have a telling story to illustrate how much it has changed my work. The last week of February, I was in Las Vegas, and we were hosting our America's annual business conference, which is when we bring together the owners and GMs of our hotels in the Americas. And just at that conference, we had launched our global plan to phase out single-use plastics. And in the same week, it was almost the same day, I got the first call in the middle of the night, the first call of an infected person, infected guest in one of our hotels in Germany. So that kind of illustrates how our responsible business agenda, which was in full swing, and we had brilliant plans and building on our achievements, but wanting to do better, all of a sudden was completely overtaken by safety and the health and safety protocols that we now go into. So safety is first. It was already there in January, but it became prominent and a complete priority, overtaking everything as of, I would say, February.
How long do you think this period of very little progress on responsibility, other than the COVID and the biosecurity issues, how long do you think this delay will be on the other parts of the agenda, which are obviously equally important? Plastics, carbon emissions are major crises for us. But are you going to be able to deal with both?
Well, we are dealing with both. In the middle of the past months, we have, for example, managed, and I'm proud of that, with the team, they did a great job. We managed to publish our 2019 Sustainable Responsible Business Report, which is our sustainability report, our annual sustainability report. We published it end of April. So we are still doing both. I just say to everyone, to my team, to my colleagues, to the world, as we're doing now, that it's not that we forget about responsible business, but we just have to, A, put some projects on ice for a moment. So we have to put them in the freezer for a while until we can take them out again and work on them full spring. But also, I think it's time to look at what we are doing, how we are supporting the business, and maybe change our priorities. But I can tell you, we cannot self-isolate from climate change. So that's actually something that will be there as we come out of this COVID-19 pandemic. And also, I think there's also on the think people side, on responsibly caring for people, there's a lot of work to be done as we come out of this COVID-19 pandemic.
Do you think there's broad agreement and acceptance across the employees of Radisson that the carbon crisis will be something we can't self-isolate from, and that in some ways it's a bigger crisis just down the road?
Well, I think for now, people's minds is still, and it should be, on health and safety. As many countries start to relax their restrictions, as we gradually move, we went into the escalation, and now as of, let's say, a week or two, a little bit more in some countries, we're going into the de-escalation phases to come to what could be called the new normal. So I think as long as we're not in that new normal, everybody will absolutely be fully focused on health and safety and how do we operate? How do we open hotels again in a safe manner, step by step? How do we open our offices again, step by step? I went to the office for the first time in 2.5 months yesterday. So this is...
How was that, Inge? How was it like? What was it like going back into the office after 2.5 months?
It was fantastic to see some colleagues again. I think that's, we all work virtually like this, but we are, I like human contact. It's really great to be interacting with colleagues again, face to face, even though, of course, at the physical distance that we respect. But I do think that people will appreciate that also as our hotels reopen, and we have today still a little bit less than 1/3 of our portfolio is closed, but we see an acceleration of hotels reopening. And you also see that people really want to interact. So you see that in our hotels that are open, and you see it in the offices.
You want to say a little bit more about how COVID-19 has impacted on your work?
Yes, absolutely, with pleasure. So I talked about the escalation phase and the de-escalation, and the way we did that in Radisson is we defined 4 levels. So we went from a level 1, which is a normal, up to level 4, which is when hotels are closed, and then from 4 we're going back to 1, which is the new normal. And as an element of the safe reopening or business recovery of our hotels, we have launched the Radisson Hotel Safety Protocol, which is actually, we launched that a month ago, and we launched it in partnership with SGS. And SGS is one of the leading companies worldwide in health and safety inspections and procedures. So they are our partner. We have put in place 20 plus 10 steps. So the 20 steps for the guest experience, for a safe guest experience, and 10 steps specifically for meeting and events. And SGS is going to help us globally to validate that we roll this out correctly and consistently across our global portfolio.
What do you see as the significant changes in travel and tourism as they're going to affect the hospitality sector going forward?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had one, but I don't.
Inge, that's why I invited you, was for your crystal ball.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think we see a number of things. First of all, and it has been said by the Secretary General of the UNWTO, trust is the new currency, and it's going to stay the new currency for quite a while. We see that safety is on the forefront of everyone's minds, but I think it's safety of ourselves, of the property where we go, the hotels, but also I think safety and protection of people in a more general meaning as well. It's about the traveler's concern about their own safety, but also in the interaction. And as also a projection of that on the local community. So we see a lot of more comments, for example, in our Q&A, in our quality audits, in our guest feedback systems. We see a lot more comments from guests on safety, questions and comments. So that is absolutely the trust. We need to rebuild that. That's why we have launched the Radisson Hotel Safety Protocol. So, but I want to say something about collaboration in a moment. So trust is a new currency. I think innovation is sparked. Look at us. I mean, we're now in a global virtual conference. Innovation will be there to remain. You will see, for example, in meeting and events, as I said before, I think the physical meetings will come back, but there will be an opportunity, for example, to innovate and involve many more people when we are having a company event or a business meeting, to use that innovation. Innovation will stay in terms of check-ins, check-outs, doing things virtually, ordering in restaurants by a menu that we get on our phones. You know, all these things will stay. So trust, innovation, and I think there's also, coming back to your earlier comment, Harold, lessons to be learned on sustainability. Because if we globally can handle a crisis of the size and the impact of COVID-19, our next crisis is not going away. It's there. Climate change is there. We have also proven that we can reduce carbon emissions in an absolute manner. It is a crisis, it is there, and it will also be part of maintaining safety for people around the globe, because that's where sustainability and safety come together. It's in mitigating the risks of climate change, on food security, on being prepared and trying to lessen the impact of natural disasters, etc., etc. But mind you, and I'm sure you know this, but there have been estimations that now, due to the COVID-19 actions around the globe, carbon emissions have been reduced by 4% compared to last year. But actually what we need to meet the targets is 6-7% every single year. So we're not there yet. The crisis is waiting. And I think not only I think, we need to think about recovery in a responsible manner.
Inge, I don't have a crystal ball either, but some of the material I've been reading recently from the scientists would suggest that, you know, over the last 20 years, we've seen a number of epidemics of virus-based diseases, and it's not likely that this will be the last. There may well be another and another after that. And I think what we learn now, really important to hang on to that. We forgot after the First World War, but we need to remember now how we deal with these kind of pandemics and have the systems in place to do it better next time. You said you wanted to say something about collaboration, Inge.
Yeah, I think, you know, because I've been talking about Radisson Hotel Safety Protocol, and of course our peers in the industry have done similar things. But what we also have done from the outset is to say, listen, this is not just about the safe reopening of Radisson hotels. It's really about the safe return to travel and the safe reopening of travel and tourism in general. So we have worked very closely with the World Tourism and Travel Council, the WTTC, to define a hospitality framework for the safe return to travel, and it's called Safe Travels. There's actually a mark or a label that any company, it doesn't have to be a member of WTTC, but any hotel company, large or small, can actually use. And this framework puts together a global common denominator that all the major hotel companies are doing, and others that major OTAs have subscribed to. So this is important. We've done this together. There is a framework available, and I would really call upon the wider industry to really adopt this framework, because that gives transparency for the traveler and it gives the trust that we so much need. And as you know, in a similar way, Harold, we're working together very well with all leading hotel companies in the International Tourism Partnership on responsible business. So on responsible tourism, responsible hospitality for people and the planet.
I'm assuming, Inge, that the business traveller will probably come back before the leisure traveller. Is that your assumption inside Radisson?
Well, actually, no, it isn't. And it was my surprise as well. Of course, it depends on the market.
Sure, sure.
We closely watch what is going on in China, because China is so much ahead of us.
Yeah.
Got the virus under control relatively quickly. And so we are learning a lot from what is happening in China. But we first, actually, if I look at the projections of our commercial colleagues, we expect first staycations, local
Right.
travel, families, family travel to come back. So that is actually what we are expecting first, and then business travel second. Now, of course, you know how meeting and events and business travel goes in seasons and in waves. So we are, of course, now preparing for the meeting and events to pick back up, and for business travel to pick back up. And I've had numerous calls already about our safety protocol with our major corporate clients. We are having very close contacts also with the OTAs, but actually our commercial teams expect leisure travel within the region or within the country to come back first, and then business travel.
It sounds to me as though Radisson is prepared for this to be the new normal for some time.
Well, we have to be flexible, right? And we are preparing for this new normal. I think it will carve out. So we do expect certain things to remain. As I said, I think the innovation will remain. We are more used to digital world right now. And I also think that there will be some safety measures that will remain in terms of the distancing, the physical distancing, the expectation of that, mask wearing, hand sanitizers, all these elements that now have become part of our lives globally, they will remain. It will be an expectation that they are there, and that these trainings and items will be there in the guest experience. I also think that there will be an expectation of or a look towards the local. People want their local communities to thrive, and they want, I think, when travel will become possible again, there will be not just for an experience of the locale as it was before, but also for a sustainability reason, both an environmental and a human social sustainability reason. There will be this expectation and ask for the more local experience.
You'll see behind me that I've got the World Responsible Tourism Awards logo up with the site where you can make nominations. It's very much the focus this year, I think, for the Responsible Tourism Awards, precisely to focus on that, Inge. What good examples can we see from around the world where hotels, tour operators, guides, whoever in the industry has reached out to engage with local communities around the COVID-19 challenge? And there is some great practice. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to reflect on from Radisson.
Well, I think the best practices that we see for the moment are very much on, I would say, how people contribute to their communities at this time. So I think we'll see the practices about local suppliers, local supply chains, food security, and all these aspects coming into play as we are a bit further. But in terms of community contribution, we've seen fantastic contributions from our hotels, from our employees, even from employees that were furloughed around the world. And if I may highlight one example, it's just one of many. We work with our global chemicals provider, Diversey, on projects like Soap for Hope, which is where soaps get taken from hotel rooms, the leftover soaps, and then get upcycled to be given and cleaned and disinfected, and then upcycled to be given to the local community for wash projects. Now, of course, if there's no one staying in the hotels and occupancy drops, that's out of the question because there's just no supply. But There's another project of diversity, which is called Linens for Life, which takes actually discarded linen from hotels, sheets or other linen, and normally transforms that into items that are needed in the local community. So that could be sheets for babies or other things. But now these local projects have started to make masks. And for example, in India, we have, and in Asia, we have cooperated with Diversity and their local partners to give those linens where we needed to change over to the local projects who have been making masks that benefit the local community. So I think there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of resilience, and we will continue to see that innovation and resilience also in social and community projects.
Inge, I hope that you'll take note of this website address where you can nominate some of these people for the awards, because in the past, the big hotels haven't necessarily put people forward, but I think there's been some stunning examples of good practice now. It'd be really excellent to see them coming through. Can I move us on though? One of the areas where I think Radisson has taken a really leading role in the past has been over human rights in tourism and hospitality. And we know that in many European countries during the lockdown, there's been a steep rise in cases of domestic abuse. What can you just remind us what Radisson is doing on the human rights agenda and what your priorities are going forward?
Yes, thank you, Harold. I think human rights will be a centerpiece of how we return to business responsibly. It has been before, but it's even more important going forward. Of course, Radisson, what we have done is we have our framework in place of a human rights policy, of human rights toolkits for all our hotels. So, for example, on human rights toolkits and training, we have training as part of our standard responsible business training that all our employees have to take worldwide and are taking. Human rights is an element in there. On the toolkit, for example, we also focus on elements like identifying trafficking, examples of modern slavery. That toolkit is being used by 62% of our hotels. So we have put the structures and the frameworks in place for our hotels to know what to do. There's also in the toolkit a self-assessment questionnaire to assess human rights risks in each hotel, because they are different in each location. They can appear everywhere, but they are different in each location. So the assessment, the toolkit, the training, and the policy are all things that we have in place when it comes to human rights and preventing certain aspects of human rights abuses.
Has it slipped down the agenda a bit because of COVID, or is it still very much there? You've been such a leader in this.
Well, I think, as I said, I think we will need to go back and really reinforce the training and the use of these toolkits and the awareness as we come out of this crisis. Because the key thing there to me is actually what happens to the employment and rather the unemployment. Because unfortunately, and it's so sad to see that this economic impact of this crisis is bigger than the financial crisis in 2008. The head of the ILO has estimated, but that was 2 months ago, so that's a century ago, right?
Yeah, it is.
Stated that there will be 195 million full-time jobs lost, and that's just the full-time jobs. Then we're not talking about subsistence jobs and other jobs, which in many countries depend so much on tourism and travel. So as unfortunately we go into this crisis of unemployment being on a steep rise everywhere, I think it's so closely connected to human rights and to potential risks that we may see there. So that's why it's going to be essential to reinforce, just like we reinforce the safety training now, is going to be essential to reinforce the training, the toolkits, the awareness as we go out of the crisis. And also, it will be essential for the tourism and travel industry to work together, which we are doing, as I said, as part of the International Tourism Partnership, to build on the existing programs for employability skills, for training of many people in many communities around the world, whether it's underprivileged youth or people who are in vulnerable positions because they lost their jobs. We need to build on the existing programs that are there, and this is a key element to reinforce globally, everywhere around the world, because of the precarious situation that many people will be in. And the last point I want to make, it's human rights, but it's also preventing trafficking, for example, because I think a lot of societies will be at risk of seeing a steep increase of trafficking. And we need to also combine with the human rights, also reinforce training awareness on that front.
Inge, you'll be pleased to know the number of people tuning in has actually increased while we've been on air. So that's good news. We've only got one question though so far, and I'll come to that in a bit. But for all those of you out there listening, please let us have your questions if you have one. Inge, can I bring you on to something else I wanted to ask you about? And in a way, you've already touched on this, but I think it's worth exploring at a bit more length. Covid-19 caused a lot of borders to close, disrupting the supply of goods and services that the hotel sector and others are very dependent upon. And I assume you've had problems from that. You might just want to reflect on some of those problems. But do you think there's a commercial need now for far more locally produced fruit and vegetables, and maybe locally produced other goods and services that you traditionally buy into hotels?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, it hasn't disrupted our supply chains to an extent that we couldn't operate in the circumstances today. But we are, and that is something that my colleagues of the strategic sourcing team are doing. They are actually mapping our global supply chain in terms of risk and in terms of possible disruption because of the global situation. Now, what you need to know is that in terms of the food supply chain, our supplies are generally local or regional. But that is one of the things that I think we need to focus on as well as we go out of this crisis, to do this in a sustainable way and to do this to make sure that we check again that the supply chains are local, and to work together with local governments, like the UAE government is doing a lot of projects to ensure or innovate and grow food locally. I think we as tourism industry and hospitality specifically, we need to work with the local governments to make sure that we can be a partner in these innovation projects in that local food supply chain, and maybe also help work on promoting local food stability, food supply chain stability, because what we will see, and because of climate change, and it's been away from the global media attention for a while, but we have all heard of the locust plague in continental Africa, in India. There's droughts. I mean, even in Belgium now, we are at a very high water scarcity. So that all impacts farming. It impacts our food supply. So this is really something that will be on the forefront of the agenda as we come out of this crisis, and as occupancy picks up again, and combined with the positive trend, I think, that travelers want more local food. I think we can change things there. We can create maybe more impact, more positive impact than we did before.
Inge, we've just come to the end of our first 30 minutes. And interestingly, we've got 4 questions, which should take us very neatly through to the end of this session. Although if anybody else has a question, please do send it in. One of the questions here is saying, do you think that the larger hotel chains are in a place to be more flexible when it comes to responding to the challenges presented by COVID and others? But is it easier for them than the green or smaller boutiques to respond to these challenges?
Well, I think You know, we've had to be agile. Whether we're big or small, we all have to be agile and flexible. I think that's what these past months have learned us, have taught us. Who would have thought when we were celebrating New Year that this would be the reality 6 months down the road? So I think the demand for flexibility is there for any of us, everyone. What I think that where we have a benefit as the global hotel chain or the bigger hotel chains is that we have teams. I mean, the teams are smaller. We have to be efficient. We are efficient. We work with zero-based budgets, but we still have teams. We still have expertise. We still have resources internally available to respond both from a safety and security point of view and also from an environmental point of view. But I do think that where the single or the smaller groups or the boutique hotels have a benefit is that they can be more innovative in a way because they control their portfolio, they control what they do. So I think if we can bring together the best of those both worlds, and in platforms like the International Tourism Partnership or through the help of WTTC, we can actually accelerate certain things.
I think it's also true, isn't it, Inge, that the safe travels protocols are freely available. They've not been locked up behind a firewall. Anybody can use them and apply them to their own hotel or guest accommodation, however small.
Yeah, exactly. And that we did that with WTTC for the safety, safe travels. And we're doing it with ITP for anything related to sustainability and responsible hospitality. So the tools are out there. The contribution is welcomed from, you know, both boutique hotels and the large chains. The large chains collaborate because we all know each other, so we collaborate in these platforms.
Yeah.
But these tools are freely available, and it will help accelerate impact, positive impact, and in terms of safe travels, it will help create consistency and transparency for the traveler.
I think I'd like to congratulate everybody who has made sure that this material is available freely to anyone who wants to use it. It's excellent that it's not been locked up in the consultant's toolkit or kept privately behind the firewall. Inge, we have a couple of questions from Abu Dhabi, which I think are interesting. I'm going to combine them because I think in some ways, they go together. We've got someone from Abu Dhabi saying we're really interested to hear if you think we can really keep enforcing the responsible tourism agenda at the same time as dealing with COVID-19 in this brave new world. But also a question from somebody else in the MENA region saying, is there anything you particularly recommend for MENA region's hotels to address when the main focus, I'm thinking this might be from Morocco or somewhere similar, where the main focus in the past has been on mass tourism? And how do you combine responsible tourism with the challenge of mass tourism?
Mm. Yes, I think, you know, the governments, and we have worked closely with the governments in the MENA region as we were going into the escalation. And today even we still have quite some hotels uh, who house quarantined guests or even infected guests. So the cooperation with the authorities in the MENA region has been exemplary. I mean, the clarity with which they have also set policies in this crisis is amazing and very much welcomed. And I think there is a very strong partnership in the crisis. And I hope that that partnership can be built on to also work sustainably as we come out of this crisis. And of course, the focus is different for every country or every sub-region in the MENA area. For example, we were talking about sustainable food or the sustainable production of food. I think that local food, those are the things we need to really closely work on. Continue to work on resource availability and how we can promote. Well, it has been said that the peak of fossil fuels has been reached. So let's see what we can do, how we can collaborate, how we can work on preventing water scarcity. So all these things, and then of course the social dimension on employability, as I said before, and that can be done around certain big events like the FIFA World Cup in Qatar in 2022, where we were working with the government on human rights. It can be done around Dubai Expo, which is going to happen next year. So there was a sustainability element. Let's do that. But I also think in terms of mass tourism, that's where I think, and again, not having a crystal ball, but certainly for the foreseeable future till end of 2021, we will all live with physical distancing. We will live with capacity constraints because we need to respect those physical distancing measures. So in that sense, a more responsible mass tourism will be, I think, on the agenda. And any country in MENA has assets. I mean, as a country, in their culture, in their heritage, in their natural environment, in the way they do things, in so many ways, every country has that heritage and has those strengths to focus on those. So I would do a call to do this together with the local governments, because the trust is really there, taking us through this crisis as we come out of it, to really think about how that can be relevant for each of the countries. And let's do this together for hotel companies, large and small, and boutique hotels, and for all aspects of tourism and travel.
Thanks, Inge. I'm actually old enough to remember that one of the main concerns of UK consumers when I was first aware of package holidays was whether the hotel had been built. Luckily, we've moved well beyond that now. That's no longer the case, and we don't need to worry anymore about whether the sheets will be clean. Exactly. But it does seem to me that our expectations of the cleaning and hygiene standards that we're now going to expect of hotels is much higher. We've had a very interesting question from somebody from ResNet World saying, what do we think is the role of hygiene certification from local authorities to ensure that the hotels are actually doing what they say they're doing with the safe travel guidelines? Because that still will be a gap, not with Radisson, let me hasten to add. I'm sure that's not a problem for Radisson. But we know there will be other groups of hotels, other individual hotels, which perhaps use the logo, but don't meet the standard. Do you have any views about that?
Yeah, I think validation is key, because that is what builds the trust of the customer. And that's why we have gone down the route of building this global partnership with SGS to validate our safety protocol. So validation, I think it's an excellent question. I think in terms of understanding of what the Safe Travels framework looks like, I would really encourage local governments to also work with the private sector, to work with WTTC, and to have local labels that build on that framework. In terms of validation, validation is important, whether it's through a self-assessment or whether it's through another form of validation. It is important because we need to give that trust to the client who is traveling. So whatever form of validation, the logo of WTTC, the stamp, the logo is now available, the mark, if you wish, is available. But I think it's important to have that collaboration with the local governments to recognize the existing validations that different hotel companies have been putting in place, but also think about how they want to validate that the Safe Travels framework is actually being implemented.
And it's one of the most difficult areas, isn't it, to establish trust in, because you can't see the virus. The room may appear perfectly clean, but actually the virus could still be there. And I think that's still going to be a challenge moving forward.
I would be, you know, if you know that the hotel has done their cleaning and disinfection as for the protocols that are in the Safe Travels, but also as many governments have been stating, with the right products, and if you know that all the team has been trained, and if you have the right personal protective equipment in place and all these things, I think we can say that this is the best way possible to prevent further spreading of the virus. You can't see the virus, but I wouldn't create unnecessary panic. We operate, we live in our daily lives as well, and in hotels and in any business actually, there's increased attention to all these points which I mentioned before. And we do this because we genuinely care. We care for the guests and we care for our employees and anybody who has interactions with our hotels, and all business owners have that. So I think it's true, the virus is still amongst us, but it's closely monitored by local authorities. There is extensive testing and tracing capability in an increasing number of countries. And if we give transparency and validation about what we're doing in all these businesses, in all these hotels around the world, then the travelers can have that trust to come back to the countries and travel again.
That leads on to what may be our final question, I think, which comes from Tuscany, interestingly. Nice. From a hotelier asking there, with the new global currency of safety, security and hygiene as part of the marketing mix, I'm assuming it's a he, it might be a woman, wants to promote responsible tourism methods alongside the normal things they market. But how do they publicly validate that they are doing what they say they're doing?
I'm not sure I fully understand.
Well, I mean, you can make a marketing claim,
yeah.
But how do you demonstrate to your consumer that you're actually in compliance with the claim you're making? Is that where the local authority engagement becomes critical, do you think?
Well, I think, as in anything, you know, it's essential to give that transparency and communication to your client, whether it is on the safety and security or whether it is on responsible business. But the client will not be able to see everything. So you will need to do things behind the scenes. And that's where like an eco label or now a validation on hygiene and disinfection and cleanliness is important, because there's things that the traveler will not be able to see. But as a minimum, you need to offer transparency and you need to offer some visible signs. Like, you know, you can say we practice physical distancing, but you'll need stickers on the floor to make it happen. One of the things that we've put in our protocols, and that's really a mind shift for hoteliers. We've told our hotels, and we've written it into our protocols, is to say, when you disinfect the public spaces like lobbies, you know, every so many hours, every 4 hours as a minimum, do that when people see it, which is strange to everyone, because usually it was like, we'll do it when no one sees it. But now you need to create that visibility for certain things so that you have that transparency, that people can see what is going on, and you record it, and you'll hang up those records, those track sheets in the public spaces. Give that transparency. And then if you can combine it with validation, either offered by your local government or an eco label or a safety label, or as we did with global partners like SGS, who are offering such validation on cleanliness, hygiene and disinfection.
Inge, we're at the end of our time now. I just wanted to make a couple of comments. The one is that there's an old adage which is seeing is believing, and I think that is really important, that the implementation of these processes needs to be seen by the guests for it to be credible. And the second thought as we end this is, I imagine that there's going to be real value again in the brands, that the sense of feeling safe because it's Radisson or one of the other well-known brands, and knowing that they will take this very seriously and discipline their managers if they don't perform, will become one of the brand values and one of the commercial benefits that you have. That will be more difficult for the smaller accommodation providers, but I think we need to keep an open mind, and certainly local authority engagement with some of the smaller businesses may be very valuable. But Inge, if I could thank you very much for that. I'm told it's been fantastic, and we've actually got more people come online while we've been having this discussion. So thank you very much indeed. Much appreciated. Thanks, Inge.
Thank you, Harold, and thank you for everybody who joined.
Thank you.